Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jason Firth at MindPoint Limited, and welcome to this webinar on content types. What we're going to do is talk about what content types actually are, why they're useful, and then we're going to show you how to set them up as well. So we're going to take about half an hour today. I will get through all the slides and the demonstrations in time, and then if there are any questions, if you can use your question section on the GoToWebinar, I'll pick them up at the end if that's okay, because quite often we find on webinars people ask the same questions, or sometimes ask about a question that's coming up, and just so we can keep the webinar flowing, it's easy to handle them at the end. But we won't go anywhere until we make sure that we've answered everyone's question. So what are we going to cover today? We'll give you a quick introduction to MindPoint. We'll give a high-level overview of SharePoint and what it actually is, if anyone doesn't know. Then we're going to talk about content types, and then we'll look at things like, maximizing return on investment. We'll give some from the field recommendations, and then we'll handle the questions at the end. So, MindPoint, we're a SharePoint business consultancy based in Colchester in the UK, and SharePoint is the majority of what we do. The other items there, such as Project Server, Reporting Services, and BI and InfoPath, are all on top of SharePoint. So we are a purely SharePoint business with some other extras that we have specific skills in. And we are firm believers in providing world-class service based around business benefits. A lot of the SharePoint businesses out there in the big wide world are really interested in delivering the best technical features, trying to do things in a smart way, that kind of thing. We're really into practical things at work. What can we do out of the box? Do we have to write workflows? Do we have to do custom code? All those kind of things. We actually take a business view, and because we know SharePoint really well, we can work out what bits you need, what bits you don't need. Okay, and the idea behind that is that we can make you more efficient with as little of as little customization or just focusing on the out-of-the-box features as we need. So a couple of things about SharePoint 2013. There was a big shift when SharePoint 2013 came out in terms of the way we start to think about SharePoint as a product or as a platform that we can build business applications on. And there are four main areas that SharePoint now focuses on. One is sharing, one is organization, discover or search, and the other one is actually build, so in actually making, architecting sites, etc. But what I wanted to do was break this down with a particular view on content types and actually see how that affects the focus. So when we're sharing, we're keeping content types in central locations and making them available to everybody. So we're getting some good commonality across the business on the way that content types can be used. In terms of organizing things, we can look at things like site collections and use documents and lists and libraries with content types to make things more efficient for us as a business. And that's one of the main things that we get from content types is an efficiency. Content types, if you use them well, are also easy to find. I can actually search for a content type, for example, find me all invoices within SharePoint, and the results will just be invoices. And when we think about building our SharePoint intranets or whatever kind of system we want to build, we want to think about how the end users are going to use content and how they're going to navigate to actually find that information. And then finally, we might even be considering line of business systems, external systems to SharePoint, but surfacing some of that content in SharePoint itself. So what is a content type? In technical terms, it's a collection of fields or what we call metadata that represent an object. So for example, a task assigned to somebody to do is a content type in SharePoint, but it's made up of fields like task title, start date, end date, percentage complete, and those different fields are called metadata. And By pulling them all together, we develop a content type. Likewise, it could be an object in SharePoint, like a Word document. But what makes a Word document different to other Word documents is also the metadata that you assign. So, for example, a purchase order number, a value of an invoice, etc. So in business terms, they are just business documents or list items that we want to somehow represent in SharePoint using fields. So let's think about some practical examples. A purchase order could be a content type. It could be a Word document with a specific template. It might have fields in SharePoint like a purchase order number, client information, and it might even have workflows associated with it. It could also have some information management properties, such as it can't be deleted for 6 years. So these are all good things we can do with content types. Another example of a content type might be a performance appraisal. That could be an electronic form that goes through some kind of workflow, using a business process in SharePoint. And we are running a series of webinars around workflows with SharePoint. We've done our first one, building workflows in SharePoint Designer, and that's going to rerun next week. And after that, it will be downloadable via our website. We can also have security mechanisms built in for content types as well. So perhaps different kinds of users want to see different things. Again, lots of things we can do out of the box in SharePoint. So, the content type is more than just a file type there. Okay, it's not just a Word document. It's not just an Excel spreadsheet. It gives us, in the metadata, extra information. Just things like the task or a summary task name or a milestone when something's got to be finished by. And likewise with our document libraries, the kind of content types we might put in there could be things like an invoice, a logo, an expense form, or even something called a document set, which is a way of grouping things together in SharePoint and treating them as one entity. So let's have a quick look at a demonstration on using content types. So I'm going to come down here and start my SharePoint area. And I've got here a sales area. And within my sales area, I've got some invoices and some of the sales documents as well. If I click on the web part link there, we can see some invoices and some sales documents all in the same item. But look at this piece of metadata on the far right. It tells us what the content type is. And I can come into File and New, and now look at New Invoice, New Purchase Order, and New Sales Quote. And when I click on New Purchase Order there, SharePoint knows that this is a content type that's already been created and set up in SharePoint. And what we're going to do now is Word opens up. It's going to talk to SharePoint, get the template for that content type, and then we'll be able to fill it in and save a template. Here we go. Say enable editing. So here's a purchase order that I've got. And I can fill in some information here. Notice some of these fields here can be set up as metadata, which we can save in SharePoint as well. Let's put some details in. A job number. Let's put a price in. There we go. So now I've got a purchase order. We can save that. And Word knows about SharePoint, okay, and it already knows that I've got a sales document area, and I'll just put the title in for my new item. So now save that. I've got some demonstration gremlins here making my machine run a bit slow today, but that's fine. And I'll just go ahead and close this. If I just refresh my screen now, you can see that that new item's in there. So I used the content type purchase order there, okay? And another way I might want to get some information is drag and drop that into SharePoint. This time it's a file I've already got in place. Let's just expand the screen out a bit so you can see what's going on here. And it's taken that invoice as an invoice content type. So we've identified that already by setting up the default content type for this document library to be invoices. I can now come in and say new sales quote. Notice this time it's Excel. We'll just wait for Excel to fire up again. So Excel's just firing up now. It's downloaded the template from SharePoint, just like we do with the Word document. I can fill in some details. And good old Excel's done the sums for us. Let's just now save that. Now we'll press save. Notice again that Excel, because it knows about SharePoint in that window, took me to the document library as my default location, not the desktop SharePoint. And actually, one of the things we can do with content types is make SharePoint the place where everything gets created, rather than people creating things on the desktop and then dragging them over. So again, we'll just refresh the screen there, and we can see that my new consulting quotes there. And it's, again, the content type has been defined. And I can actually filter this list now, looking at, now just purchase orders. So there's some pretty powerful stuff I can do here based on content type information. And there's our, just invoices. So that's a pretty straightforward view there of how we can use content types. I'll come on to in the next demonstration how we actually set those up. So why should we use content types? Well, once you've got these content types set up with the right templates, etc., it's a massive, massive time saver for you. Okay, we can get away from people using the wrong document templates. We can make sure with the use of metadata that we can capture data at the appropriate time with correct validation of fields as well, and we can build workflows into our content types. So once you filled in that expense form, what happens next? That can be a workflow maybe in SharePoint Designer. All those things added together save money. Okay, I don't need to say anything more than that. That should sell itself. And from a legislation point of view, we can switch on information management policies with content types. So we can say things like an invoice cannot be deleted out of SharePoint for at least 6 years. Make something an official record, again into records management. We can say things like when an item becomes so many days old, start a workflow and go and do something else. So there's all sorts of things we can do with good use of content types and workflows and the information management policies as well. And also with workflows, we can build in things like authority levels. So we can say, if an expense form goes above £1,000, then it needs a senior manager to go away and actually approve that. Users do not need to go looking for the right templates. Okay, this is quite an important one. With good use of content types and setting them up in the correct SharePoint libraries or SharePoint lists, you can save your end users a lot of work, and the combined effect of that can go into the thousands, if not the millions, just from time saving alone. So in that last example, when we went to the sales library and we created a purchase order, the template was there already. I didn't need to go and find it. And different libraries can have different content types set up in them already. And likewise, we can set up, using the Document Information Panel, or DIP, we can set up Microsoft Office to prompt for the correct SharePoint metadata fields that we want to see when we save information. And finally, again, we'll just mention search once more. We can actually search for specific content types within SharePoint. And actually, out of the box, SharePoint will, in the enterprise version, give us a content type filter. if you don't actually put the content type in as a search term. The other thing we've got in SharePoint is a really good tool called the Content Query web parts and the Search Query web parts, and they will allow us to filter and look for documents or items in SharePoint that are of a particular content type. So again, that's another way of maybe bringing information together in a web part, maybe on your home screen, that can be a useful tool going forward. And to use those features, you have to have at least a standard version of SharePoint. Just talking about information management again. With legislation like Sarbanes-Oxley and Basel II and those things, there's been a need for SharePoint to develop its control capability around document and records management. And the information management policies allow us to keep a really tight control on information that's stored in SharePoint. So we can treat documents and items as official records. So once something becomes an official record, we can say it can't be deleted anymore. Or we can have timed events happening on those records. We can also, with content types, allow automated routing. I worked on a project for a client a couple of years back where they just wanted their sales people to load information into one place in SharePoint. And then we used something called Content Organizer within SharePoint to actually move the information based on its content type to the right place in SharePoint. Again, SharePoint was doing all the work there. We were making life easy for our end users. Because one of the concerns clients often have is, if we switch on all the metadata stuff within SharePoint, are our end users not going to be become disengaged because they'll have too much information to fill in? And it just doesn't have to be like that. Providing you've got some good thought processes around what you're going to capture in terms of metadata, we can make things easy for people. So let's have a look at setting up some content types. Back to my demonstrator. Go back to our sales area again. And this time I'm going to go to my finances document library. And at the moment, this is a brand new document library with just new document set up. So there are no content types here yet. So this is just a SharePoint library I've just created. I'm going to come to Site Columns. I'm waiting for SharePoint to catch up, but it should do. I should explain I'm running this on a small laptop rather than a big server farm at the moment, hence a bit of a delay. And within Site Columns, I can say Create, and I can put in here a content type, a piece of metadata. Put a currency in there, and go and press Save. Give it a new group. We'll call the group for the field MindPoint, and we'll give it 2 DPs. The minimum value of 0, because you can't have minus currency. Now, what I've done there is create a piece of metadata or a site column that's available anywhere within my SharePoint site. I'm now going to come to Site Content Types and press Create. Let's put the name in here, call it Expenses. We're going to have Financial Docs as my parent content type. So content types can be hierarchical and can inherit metadata from each other. I'm now going to come to Advanced Settings. I'm going to upload a document template for this content type. I can come into here and I've got travel expenses form I created earlier. Press OK. And there we now have our travel expenses form. Note here the information management policy settings and the document information panel settings. Of course, the workflow settings, but we're going to come on to those another time. So here's my new expenses content type. I'm going to create another one, and we'll call this international expenses. We'll make it a financial document again, and we'll say MindPoint's the content type group. Here we are, international expenses and our financial documents one. Come to advanced settings again and load up the template. Press OK. And now we come to files and new. And we've still just got new document at this stage because the work we've just done has actually been at the site level or the site collection level. What we need to do is tell this document library to allow content types. And to do that, we come to advanced settings. Say yes here to allow management of content types. So there's a two-stage process here. There is the set them up of content types and then the adding them to content types as well. Now you notice there I switched off the new folder button because folders in SharePoint are really not a good idea, and if anyone wants to ask me about that later, please do. But if you're using folders in SharePoint, you really shouldn't be doing that. And now you can see I've got my content type of document, but also expenses, and also international expenses. But I'm going to change something here. I don't want people to put in just a plain document. So I've switched that off. And now you can see that I've got the two here. And in fact, I'm going to take that a step further. I'm actually going to delete that content type. Now this doesn't delete the content type of document from SharePoint. It just deletes it from the library that we're in. Now I can press new and see expenses or international expenses. So the other thing to mention here while Excel's just loading now is those content types can be used in anywhere in the SharePoint farm. Okay, so they don't have to be just available in this library that I've just added them to. I can make them available in other libraries as well. So there's some really powerful background information in between the two. And now I can say new international expenses, and we'll see that form as well. It's just downloading the form. And now I can say enable editing, and here's my international expenses form, and so be it. So that's a very quick introduction of how we set those up. So what about metadata? Because I've mentioned fields and metadata there a lot. I also mentioned not to use folders, okay, and tie all those things together. If you think about folders, all folders really do is give us a way of storing and organizing information, but they have a problem. Items can only exist in one folder, okay, and therefore your metadata might not work. A good example there is if I've got a project with 5 phases, and I've got a requirements document that has to be available in phases 1, 2, and 4. The only way to do that with folders is to copy that document. With metadata instead, we can tag that document to say it's appropriate to be used in stages 1, 2, and 4, and then use views in SharePoint to actually show the data in that format rather than folders. Another much improved way, if you've got the enterprise version of SharePoint, is to use manage metadata navigation. What that can do is allow us to have millions of documents in a folder, or in a document library, sorry, and then use the manage metadata navigation to quickly search and filter that information. And we're going to cover that in a future webinar on content types and metadata navigation, but something to have a look at. Content types tie in with the metadata very well, and clearly with metadata navigation. So we can then filter and say, show me in this library full of all these folders, just the invoices, and filter that really quickly. So let's think about how we might get a good return on investment. So If you're using SharePoint, a good approach is to try and create a single portal for all of your corporate information. And in order to do that, you will need to use something called the Content Type Hub to share your content types across different site collections. But it's not a big deal to set up. And if you're stuck with that, please do get in touch. We can help. We can use and foster collaboration by introducing content types to reduce wasted time, wasted effort, and improve our operational effectiveness as businesses. That then leads to improved productivity, including an extensive search capability and tools for managing versions as well. So we can tie all of this content type stuff in to document management. So some thoughts. If you're not using content types already, or at best you started playing around with content types and got yourself into a mess, do think about some planning and maybe what we call an information architecture workshop. Perhaps even get us in to work with you on that, because we've got the right kinds of experience. So clean up the mess if you've got yourself into one already. If not, plan. Invest your time to really understand what content types are about. This webinar will be available as a record in a couple of weeks' time, if not sooner. So understanding what content types are is going to be time well invested. Run a workshop so you can work out what the key content types are within your business. And I would go for things that the most users will use. So things like expenses, appraisals, holiday booking forms. Those kind of things that are common business processes work on first. And the same then applies to workflow as well. Then get some help or do some planning on working out how and where you're going to use content types. I would say pick a few small ones first, then build on them, okay? So we're going to go to some Q&As. Before we do that, just thanks again for attending the webinar today. I'm going to answer any questions that have come up now, and do feel free to get in touch for an informal discussion if this has prompted some things that you'd like to think about going forward. So I'm just going to go to the questions. We've got a couple here. So Dave, nice you could attend it, Dave. Thank you for that. Dave's asking, I've got some core list templates with the columns he likes to use. Okay. So, Dave, okay. Dave's saying he's got some templates set up for lists with, and some templates for libraries with some default metadata tags in there. And he's asking, what's the advantages or disadvantages of using content types over templated lists? Unfortunately, with SharePoint, the answer is often it depends. But in a nutshell, with templated lists or libraries, you have a fixed set of metadata tags that will apply to everything. So what I would probably say is, if you're introducing content types, you can clearly have more than one content type in a library, because in a library you can have Word documents, which are invoices, Excel documents, PowerPoint slides, images, etc. With a list, it's a little bit less obvious, but let me give you an example. In the task out-of-the-box task list in SharePoint, you've got tasks and summary tasks. They are two different content types, and they do have different metadata associated with them. So people don't really understand that with lists as much as they should. So let me give you another example. If I'm using a RAID log, which is risks, actions, issues, and decisions, I could have all of those things, which are four very different kinds of content in the same list in SharePoint. That's very hard to do with a templated version. So I'm hoping that answers your question, Dave. Okay, there are no more questions as far as I can tell. So very much thank you for your time today. And I've enjoyed your company. Before we all go, I would like to just run a poll. get an idea of where you are with SharePoint. So I'm going to just select a poll here and launch that, and if you can give me your answers, I'd appreciate that. And that sums up the webinar today. So thanks for your time, everybody, and look out for further webinars that you'll be getting via our marketing, or there will soon be a link on our website as well with links to past webinars.